Okay, it is a little after 6:30, and this is Wednesday, October the 3rd. Welcome to week one of Contemporary Issues in Criminal Justice. And it is nice to see that I have so many students in this class from other classes that I have taught. And yeah, it was a short break, but you know, back at it again. I find myself in the situation where I keep moving forward, and actually I'm kind of programmed to get started right about now. So but yeah, to each of you in this class who've had me in other classes, you're going to discover that this class is less of a hands-on class from me as a professor. I always tell students that this course is more like an independent studies course, and that I'm here to uh, help and guide you along, and that this lecture will take place today, and then I think the next one doesn't take place until week 3. Um, I think then week 6, week 8, and then I believe week 10. But at any rate, during that period, everybody knows the rules to reach out to me. So I'm going to just go ahead and get started and share my screen here. Let's get here. Okay. And usually whenever I do this particular course, I don't have to go as much detail. My instructor information, you'll notice one thing. Blackboard has a new look. I'm kind of getting accustomed to it. It's a little different, but it's supposed to be better starting now. So we'll see. So anyway, as you know my name, and you know my rule about you can text me, email me, call me any hour of the day except the 25th hour of the day. And I remind you that in your written assignments, this is very important, and keep this in mind and store this, that in your written assignments, even with your field reports, you're going to do some research and provide APA citations in the body and references in the end. All too often, students miss points because when they do some of the things, they say, "Well, how do I provide citations?" I said, "Because you're supposed to be doing research, and then also the agency that you use, the person that you use, kind of akin to the way that the what was it? The interview was done for those of you who took J115 Introduction to Corrections." So anyway, the key thing is that we want you to always provide citations to support your statements. And then your critical thinking, you're very familiar with this at this point because I think you've even each at this point had a class in critical thinking and the importance of running your papers through Grammarly, making sure that you don't get hit with the high Grammarly hit where I'll deduct the percentage of the work that is included in your paper when it's excessive. Usually when it's 25% or more, a lot of professors are higher than that. So, but at any rate, very important. Also, you make sure you conduct research. There is no textbook in this course, so you don't have to worry too much about that issue. But you want to make sure that citations and references, you also want to make sure you provide a cover sheet. Double spaced assignments. I don't take away if people do single space, but I do recommend that. These things I'm not going to go over with you because most of you are familiar with them, but you can take a look at them about tutoring, also these articles, critical thinking. So then we come right to our rubrics. Our rubrics are very important. You'll see APA grammar at the end. A lot of people lose 5 points, and they get 25 points. They'll, for example, do this and explain the field of interest and the three components of the criminal justice system that you discovered from week one, and then they'll get those points, and then significant events for each decade for your chosen field, and then they will leave off citations in the body or references in the end. So it's very important that when you complete these written assignments that you do use the rubric. I've stressed that over and over in all my classes that I teach. So that's the then versus now. I've already graded one paper that some people have submitted already. And then you go all the way down to where you see our lectures take place 6:30 p.m. Beginning today. And it's an open house. And then the remaining lectures take place weeks 3, week 6, as I said, week 8, and week 10. Same time as well. And that you must attend the live lectures or view the archive. They'll be given a keyword at the end of this session, as I have in other sessions. And then you're required to provide that to me. And then, of course, the recordings, and then I will put them under here. Notice, as you already know, I submit my recordings to you in a link, and I also convert them into MP4s. And MP4s are good for a number of reasons, is that you can use them easily in other ways. If I left them in the WebEx, you'd be totally at the mercy if something went wrong with WebEx, that you would have trouble getting the lecture. There's been a couple of times last quarter that they had some issues with WebEx. YouTube is usually pretty readily available for everybody pretty easily to get to. So I continue to do that. So it takes a little bit after the session is over for me to convert it over. So now let's get to the announcement. That's the one about the new the new Blackboard, so I'm not going to go over that. APA assistance, I'm not going to spend time over that because you should be familiar with that, but then there's a link there about that as well to help you with APA. So let's go before we get to week 1 announcement, and then I remind you that this is an open house, and then I would cover the field project in detail, so you'll have an idea about the field project as well. So let's look at the welcome announcement, which many of you are familiar with. It's pretty standard that I use, and it tells you these highlighted points. Make sure you keep those in mind. Most of you are familiar with these, and so you follow them along pretty well. Then it tells you again our lecture schedule, and it lets you know when they take place. The course calendar, which you guys are all familiar with, also contains the same information as well. Okay. So then I'm going to go right to our week 1 announcement. So this week, an overview of capstone will be presented. And I remind you again that your reading is your research, your papers, and things like that. There is no textbook for this course because, as I stated before, this is more of a survey course, and you get a chance to go over things that you've previously learned in your studies. And many of you are on the way to getting your associates and heading toward bachelor's. So that's what this course is intended for. It's a survey and a summary to prepare for the assignments. And I say read the module and the grading rubric. I said that before. Those are very important that you follow them. Okay. And then the beginning of a week when our lectures take place as well. That is here. Your discussion assignment, of course, the initial post was due yesterday. Relationship between the three components, and that the initial post course is always due on Tuesdays, and then reply post Saturday till we get to the last week of the course, week 11. Finally, complete the written assignment then versus now. So we've already talked about that with your rubric as well. And then I'll discuss the fieldwork component in just a minute. And then the Let's Start Strong and Finish Strong. Adversity is the springboard to success. You guys, most of you have heard my story. I'm going to give a shortened version in this class because all you guys know why I am the way I am and why I say adversity is the springboard to success. But I'm going to put it out there at the very end. So now let's take a look at the syllabus. Syllabus, of course, you all are familiar with that by now. It tells you things like my name, my phone number, email address, and then it reminds you about what I said about the 2 points, which you don't really have to worry about, but you do have to be sure that you do the APA citations and references. So then I go scroll down. You know that when discussion posts are due. So the requirements in this course consist of discussion posts, your written assignments, and your field work. A 10-hour of field work experience. Now, 10 hours of field work experience for 11 weeks is not a whole lot. And, you know, so it's going to be with an agency of your choice, but you're going to let me know what that agency is. And unlike the course, that Introduction to Corrections, you could use any area of criminal justice. You can even use law enforcement, which is a no-no for those of you who took Introduction to Corrections. And a few people found that out the hard way. Then there's a program assessment, 100 questions will cover topics throughout the program. Now, that is not the ACAT. Some of you have looked at that. This is a different one. This is week 11 that you're going to deal with these 100 questions. And students have asked how do they prepare for these. Well, basically, it's when it says assessment, it's trying to determine how proficient you are and what you've learned in your whole career of being a student in criminal justice. So it's kind of hard. You don't have to go back and study all your courses all over again, but there are things that are fundamental that should stick to you to help you prepare for your career in criminal justice. And then your live lectures, okay? Your grades, discussion, 110 points. And so you have 20 points each week, 10 for initial posts, 10 for reply posts, which is 17.6% of your grade. Your written assignments are 300 points, 300, which is basically almost half, or 48%. Your field work, that's your project that you're going to be doing, 90 points, or 14.4%. Your program assessment is going to be 100 points, and 16%. So you want to do uh, pretty well. Now, your live classroom is, your points that you get. You get the 5 points for each of the 6 lectures that you have. Five lectures that you have. All right. So it's a total of 625. So now I'm going to make my announcement that you guys are all aware that my goal is to get you in the A and B, and most of the students in this class have fallen in that category. But I have said, and I say continuously, never text me, email me, call me in class. I will not answer you because I don't produce C students. You can do that all by yourself, but you're doing yourself a disservice if that's your goal to just pass, because when it comes to opportunities for employment, you'll carry that over into your work, and your work ethics could be damaged. And with the job market being as it is today, there's a lot of competition for positions. Have the studying well or operate on a high level will be the ones that get the best positions and the best jobs. And I don't know anybody that I've had as a student who has come to me and said to me, I don't want the best job. Um, I can't conceive of even hearing that. You're paying really good money, and you're putting your time in and your effort, and trust me, uh, yours truly is living proof that it pays off and that it will benefit you down through the years, so that you can do things. I have people who they laugh when they find out what I do. I'm retired, and they say, "But you work full time." I says, "Yeah, but I teach online. I teach on my laptop. So I take my laptop and I go to Vegas. I'll go to Florida, where I'm going uh, soon. I'm not going to talk about that too much. Uh, but there's a number of things that I will be doing concerning getting assignments completed. I've been in a lot of places across the country, and students are there, and I have a chance to reach out to them, and so it's nice. Um, I work at pretty leisurely schedule. I have a lot of work, but I enjoy it. I enjoy it. I'm not restricted to being in one classroom anytime or have to physically travel. Otherwise, man, I'd have frequent flyer miles because you guys are all over the country. So then I want to talk about the transferable skills, because I'm going to skip over this stuff because you're familiar with this. I do that anyway, those of you who know me. Transferable skills, once again, I won't go into detail with them. Uh, we have been teaching you how to be good and important that you have these skills when you leave this college. Communication is one, very, very, very important. Critical thinking goes without saying. Digital fluency, I've talked about that. You guys understand the importance of that because we're in a society where everything is digital now. I remember when I started out and graduated in 1978 from law school, we didn't even have technology. We had regular books and paper. The closest thing I had was an IBM Selectric typewriter, and then I got something called an IBM word processor, and I thought I had arrived. But then, later on after that, the first system of computers came where people were using the DOS system. I never understood it, never tried it, and so anyway. But now we have Windows, and we got all kinds of things like this right here that each of you have, where you can even assess. I can assess my lectures on and conduct them with the apps that I have on my Android phone. Of course, many of you guys, the younger generation, are into Apple, and I can't get with it. I'm an Android person. I'll stay an Android person, and so I like that. But anyway, the bottom line is you're going to need to use these tools in your professional career as well. Diversity and teamwork. We have people from all walks of life that you're going to come in contact with in your educational career. We have some issues right now where it seems like there's some attacks on diversity. People who believe differently from you, people who are from different uh, sexual persuasions, or even people who have different political beliefs, religious beliefs, and so forth. Everybody should respect people from different backgrounds. You in the criminal justice area, it goes without saying. I've said this, will be working heavily with people that you don't even understand. Can you imagine being a law enforcement officer and you don't speak any Spanish and you come upon a Hispanic person, or you don't speak any Polish and you come upon a Polish person, or no Chinese and the person doesn't speak English? So the point of the matter is that you're still going to have to connect with those individuals. You're going to have to respect those individuals. You can't make fun of people. Right now we have something that's happening that displeases me in this country, where I see politicians making fun of females, making fun of disabled people, and people from different backgrounds than they are. That's a no-no. That is a absolute no-no. And we say to you that that skill of dealing with diverse, which is the root word for diversity, is something that you're going to have to live with and operate in your field. You maybe have a partner of a different ethnic group. I actually um, worked for a big Jewish law firm that many of you know, and I ended up learning the whole Jewish culture, how things operated. Even if I didn't believe in everything that they believed in, I still respected the beliefs. I participated in a lot of the ceremonies, Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, also dealing with uh, going to a lot of events that were different from what I was accustomed to. I've been to some Greek weddings, very interesting. Of course, you have to bring your appetite when you go to those. But the point of the matter is I'm simply trying to stress to you that just because of what you believe in and what you know, it is important for you to recognize that there are people that are different from you that you're going to work with, you're going to meet in school, and maybe even marry. So the point of the matter is it's all good, and respect is the key thing. You're going to be working in teams. How do you work in teams in this course? Same way you worked in team in other courses that have been online, using the discussion posts, commenting to each other. I do encourage students to reply to more than one post. You don't get any extra credit, but what it does is it opens up the discussion in the discussion post. Some of those people you never see because they're in other parts of the country. Imagine you're in Minnesota and you're communicating and getting to know someone down in Florida, or vice versa, or Texas. I had a student from Alaska. I had a student from California, North Carolina, South Carolina, New York, D.C., you name it, Ohio, and Wisconsin. So anyway, you're going to work with teams, and professional is very, very important in life, but it's also very important in criminal justice. You are going to find yourself in situations where if you operate unethically, producing false reports, uh, dealing in the code of silence, if you're in law enforcement, or if you're a corrections officer, not um, doing what you're supposed to do as far as dealing with the inmates themselves, Um, the bottom line is ethics will help you to succeed if you operate in properly, or it will cause you to fail if you have poor ethics. And I have said time and time again that if you are an unethical student, you will be an unethical professional, and it will catch up with you. I guarantee you, without fail, it will catch up to you. Your responsibilities professionally, follow the rules. As a lawyer, when I practiced, we had a code of conduct. We even had this thing that we weren't even necessarily doing something wrong, but even the appearance of impropriety was one of the rules. So we had to really check ourselves very carefully. That applies also to judges, and so it's important in all aspects of your professional work that you follow the rules and policies of the agencies. Information literacy, we are on what we call the superhighway, the World Wide Web. There's information out there. There's some information that's good, some information is bad. For example, there's sources that are good, sources that are bad. When you're doing papers or doing any assignments, you want to make sure you have credible resources. Don't use sources like Wikipedia. Try not to rely on law firm pages. They are okay. However, you use them very sparingly and have to use them wisely. And you have to remember that when you do cite a source, you have to remember that sometimes when you use some of these agency or organizational um, 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 websites, you are going to get a biased position. I guess that goes without saying, but you also have to consider the circumstances that how you're using it. Strong information literacy is critical, being able to research and find sources. We're in a world where things are ever changing. We take continuing education courses even as professors to study our area, criminal justice, law, law enforcement, any areas that we work in or have worked in the past. In addition, we study various techniques for providing what we need to help you become students that are successful. Our goal is student success, and those of you who know me, that is my beginning, my middle, and my end. So information literacy is so important. So finally, on this, the late assignment policy, you know that 10% for each day that you're late, and that it can be, and here's how it works. Your assignments are due on Sundays that are written assignments, except your discussion posts. And if your written assignments are submitted on Monday, you know, and then there are students who get assignments in, and I see that the assignment is submitted like 12:05 or 12:11, 12:30. I even give up to 1 o'clock. If that assignment is submitted, I don't charge them as late because you're close to the deadline. However, though, get into the habit of changing that mindset. For example, you know the IRS has no mercy. When they say that it must be done on the 15th, and as soon as it hits the 16th, you will be assessed a penalty if it's not postmarked by that date. So I'm saying get into the habit of that, but I wanted you to know I'm not that dogmatic when it comes to that deadline, except when it comes to the completion of the course. At the end, I am required to cut it off at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time on the last day of class, and you guys know that. And so you also should be aware that I'm very flexible. In case of extenuating circumstances, I'm the one who determines what those are, but I got to know. You got to let me know. I gave you different modes to reach me. Now, let me say this to you. If I had a situation and it was going to be a problem, I would want to reach out to my instructor right away. Would I send them an email? Well, if that's the way that the professor allows you to communicate, yes. Um, would I call them up? Yes, if the professor allows. Would I text the professor? Yes, if the professor allows. But here's the point. If it's really something that you really want me to know, you will text me unless you have data issues. Sometimes people have those, but um, the best thing other than that is to call me. I already laid out the requirements for that. Call. Don't send an email because I might not. I do get emails pretty fast, but the course emails, I don't see them all the time. And it's easier for me to text you back. Some of you already know that if you text me and I see it's an urgent situation, I will call you right back because I'll have your phone number there. But as I said earlier, when you do text me, make sure you indicate your name and indicate what course it is that you're in, because I have 5 courses that I teach. Right now I'm teaching only 3, but in term 2, I will be adding 2 more courses for the last 5.5 weeks. So anyway, the point of the matter is this, is that think about it. Think about it, how urgent it is to you. And I am a professor who gives you all modes. I didn't say carrier pigeon, but I guess if you had carrier pigeons, you could do it. But the best way to reach me is by phone, text, or call, because I see those all the time. Just a few minutes ago, while I was doing this lecture, someone called me, and I saw it was a 612 number, and that was a student from Minnesota. So what I did was I had my phone on silent, but they could hear me talking and knowing that I was in a lecture. Maybe that was somebody who's trying to get into the lecture and having problems. But anyway, the point of the matter is, call me. I love to talk to my students. And there are times when you will text me and then I will call you back. And if you're at work and you can't answer the phone, don't answer the phone. Just text me back saying I'm at work, but I will call you after, or I will tell you to call me. The bottom line is I want to make a connection with your issues about your assignments. If you're having some health issues, I don't need to know all your business. I don't need letters from the doctor. I don't need your medical reports. This is college. I don't need your obituaries if someone passes away. I extend my condolences to all of my students whenever those things happen, and let them know I'm very empathetic and understand the importance of having your mind focused on what you do. And sometimes things happen that are extenuating and you have no control over. So I want to know. All right. Now, the last thing I'm going to say about late assignments is this, is I want to remind you and call your attention to something that you should know by now, but I will say it again, is that discussion posts conclude at the end of the week module. So when does discussion post conclude for this week? Actually, Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. However, I have a policy that if you submit your discussion post, your initial post, even as late as Saturday, you'll lose points. But if you submit your reply post that next day, I will take away 1 point from that. You have already lost points for the late initial post. However, if you submit your initial post and reply post on Sunday, it's not going to be accepted. Why? Because it makes a whole lot of sense. Is that we are moving on. Nobody's going to go back and read your discussion posts, or the forum is over. We're heading into the new week. We're trying to finish up the assignments that are written assignments for that particular week on Sunday. So if something happens and there's extenuating circumstances, usually what the first thing I say to students is try to make sure you at least do your posts. Even if you just can do an initial post, you'll get half the points if it's done well. I don't like one-line posts. You know that already. I don't like brief posts. Citations and references, I love them. I love it when you reply to more than one post as well. So anyway, that's the late assignment submission policy, which you guys are well aware of. I won't talk about the incomplete grade policy. That's something that you have to study for yourself and determine if you need it. Not too many students end up using it. And then your academic integrity policy, which kind of goes with what I was talking about a little earlier as one of the transferable skills, dealing with ethics. I don't have a lot of students who are guilty of these things. So I don't spend a lot of time, but you have a chance to read this. Be aware of the fact that this document, the syllabus, is an agreement and understanding between you and the college as to what you're required to do for a course. Kind of a thumbnail. Your modules and your rubrics, and then the things I talk about and share with you as a professor, elaborate more on those things. But I would say this is like a skeletal type thing. So now let's quickly, I do mean quickly, look at the calendar. Here's the course. Okay, so I got two things on there, so let me eliminate that because I got two boxes checked. Let's uncheck this one for this, and it should disappear. There we go. So now let's go back to, because you have my 1 5.5-week course that I'm teaching this quarter that you all have already had, and that was J100 Introduction to Criminal Justice. So anyway, your initial, every Monday, usually it's a reading assignment, but here this just tells you what the topic is, and it tells you what your field work component, see the instructions in Module 1 classroom, and then I, of course, cover that. And then your initial post, which gives you the topic that I've already gone over, then your open house lecture, your reply post, then your written assignment, which I've gone over already, and should be minimum 3 to 4 pages, not including reference page, and rubric. So you're going to provide that at this point, along with all the requirements that I've set out. And then next week, you'll have the same thing week 2, except you won't have a lecture. I'll see you again on the 17th. So, and it goes on down. So that's week 3, 4, 5, that's week 6. And then we keep moving down. Trust me. Trust me, trust me, trust me. We will get there before you blink your eyes good. So the calendar is a place where you can always find anything. Your announcements is where you can find anything. Your course homepage has a lot of information as well. And then the module itself. So let's get over to Module 1. Let's start with, again, repeating the assignments again. Pick a field, and it tells you what you do in the areas. And this will become the field that you might want to research. See, let me say this to you. You can make it easy on yourself by having the same theme. If it's probation, or if it's juvenile probation or adult probation, if it's corrections, you're dealing with law enforcement, or whatever it is that you're dealing with. You can also deal with the prosecutor's office or you can deal with something that I spent a lot of time doing. In addition to being a prosecutor a short period of time on a local level, I was primarily a criminal defense lawyer as well. Anyway, 3 to 4 page paper, and you're going to write and cover this issue, and you're going to follow the rubric that I gave you. Discussion posts, okay, and then your live classroom, and make sure that you submit your the keyword in order to get credit for this, whether you're here or not. But I remember who is here. Okay, like I remember this person that's here with me right now real well because the student was with me a lot last time, and I'm just going to put you out on Front Street, is that performs very well, and I appreciate hard work, and uh, it's just good. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm not going to say your name, but they'll see it anyway. Who hides when they do well? I don't know too many people who do that. Okay. People hide when they don't do well, so I don't bust them out. But I love busting out students that are what I call high performers. And then when somebody mentions the name of that student to me, I says, I know that student. And I feel like I've met you face to face, but I never have. But you have an advantage over me. You've seen me, but I've not seen you. But anyway, okay. So that's the assignments for the week. You want to get those done in a timely fashion. Then let's go to the lesson content. And this is where I usually wrap up on regular weeks. We talk about what the objective of the module is, identify the importance of hands-on experience. I've said that already. The 3 components of the criminal justice system, and you're going to be able to demonstrate criminal justice employment readiness. Remember, I said that too as well. And so the field work component. I already talked about the written assignment, discussion, and live classroom. So let's talk about the field work. This is something that, students always ask me this question. Like I got one student, and I think it's in my introduction to corrections, but let's say if this was you and you were in this class, and this student says to me that they work as a, I'm going to use the area because it was introduction corrections, and they work in the jails. They already work in the jails. They've been working in the jail for years. And they will ask me, do I have to go to another area other than the one that I am working in and getting my experience in? Based on what makes sense and being consistent, why would you want to go and study something else? When I was studying law, if I was going to do a paper, I wanted to do it on law. Okay? So this is what we call a capstone. Notice the name of it, capstone. If you go look in the dictionary under the word for the word capstone, it's saying that this is like a compilation or coming to the top or the point of everything, bringing together everything that you learn. And it says that out front, our announcement, this course is designed to recap the program objectives and prepare you to complete the program post-assessment, complete the pre-program assessment, introduction to criminal justice, and then as part of this course, you're going to do the 10-hour field work experience. Some of you, that means just reporting what you do in your job. That's fine. And, I expect those people to really do an excellent job. And so it's an approved agency of your choice. Now, when you submit to me during the first step. You'll see when we come to it. I'll let you know if there's a problem, but in this course, it's pretty flexible. You'll document and submit as your final project. So you'll be doing it in stages here. So it's important to help you prepare for working in that field. It says with these 10 hours, you'll have an opportunity to shadow a professional. That could be you yourself. But remember, when you're doing yourself, remember you're going to be engaged in explaining how work operates. You might even sometimes refer to your supervisor or providing some background information about the agency, some history of the agency and processing. Make sure you have citations and references. So to gain real work experience. So that answers the question that I initially laid out there. We say here we recognize that learning takes place other than in the classroom. Important. One of the most valuable things for me when I went to law school was courses when I had a chance to have hands-on, when I could go to court and I could see the judges and the lawyers and all the parties involved in action. That excited me, but it also prepared me because I put myself in a position of being able to see what I'm going to be doing in the future. And so what you have learned in your classrooms, you will use that in working in reality. But you will find that there's a big difference. It says here, no amount of lecture, bookwork, or discussion can make up for firsthand experience. I say amen to that and direct observation. That's what sticks to you. That's why a lot of people do ride-alongs. You know, they learn things that it really they find out what law enforcement officers actually do. You'll have the opportunity as part of this course to do that with the agencies that you participate in. So 5 steps to this. So we're going to go over step by step. First, you're going to, of course, research and identify a local criminal justice agency where you can complete these hours. Some suggestions are police departments, completing a ride-along, series of interviews or shadows within the department, a halfway house. Now, let me say this to you. I have had students who ran into problems trying to do halfway houses unless they work in there. Now, if you work in there, do not violate the privacy of the clients. Do not violate those things. So now these are for people who, some of my students are heading toward human services or other areas, but it's some of it is pretty private. Most of my students end up doing things like ride-alongs, or you can deal with a court proceeding. Make sure that before you do a court proceeding and you go to court, make sure that it is not a civil case. It is a criminal case. I had a student who told me last quarter she had to go back a couple of times because of the fact that they had civil cases. Be aware that I can tell you this as a lawyer, cases are not tried every day. Sometimes there are motions and other things that take place as well. So so it's step 1 is very, very, very important. Lay out what you want to do. And this is, listen, these are some possibilities. You can come up with some other things. If you work in a prison, or if you work in jail, or if you are working with a probation officer and you're a secretary or assistant, it's something, anything. You're working with a sheriff, those kinds of things. Note the important thing is that you can split it up. You do not have to do it in a single session. And the best work for students is not done in a single session. We used to call that cramming, and I can tell you, cramming might get you through, but it's only for purposes of passing the course. You're not taking this course to pass this course. No, don't get me wrong about my statement. You're in this course to help prepare you for your future in your criminal justice career. That's the number one thing. And in the process of doing that, then you're going to do well. You're going to dot the I's, cross the T's. You're going to follow the procedures, processes, so that you do maximize that. That's what you want to do. They have this thing called raises that go with good employees, and promotions that go with good employees. And those are the things that you are going to seek to be. This little important thing in the blue says, if for any reason you cannot identify an agency, let me know immediately, like this week. So you should be working on that. But to be honest, at this stage, 99.9% of my students don't have that problem. So that's step one, okay? So you're going to identify and research an agency, okay, which means you might look at the website. Even if you work there, you go look at the website and those kind of things. Contact the agency by letter or phone call. If you work there, you might send an email to somebody that you're going to work with. And you're going to introduce yourself. Now, of course, this is if you're not in the area. And the purpose for your request, let them know you're a student and that you're taking a class, and that is part of the requirement of class. If necessary, not too many students have had to, I will be happy to submit a letter to support you, and or you can give the person my email address and or my phone number. Feel free to do so. So you establish a date and time for completing the assignment, and if you're going to do a ride-along or an interview, do it between the 4th and 7th module. The reason for that is because of the fact that there are sometimes delays, and you don't want to get caught up in those. Boy, those of you who were in the Introduction to Corrections course know exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, there are sometimes people don't call you back right away, and so forth and so on. I've even had to help a few students in that class to get a person to do interviews with, because of some of my former students are working as professionals in corrections. Don't just show up an agency and request a ride-along or an interview. That's not professional, first of all, there. So the next stage is at least one module before your meeting, confirm the appointment. That's a very good habit to have. Confirm. I do that all the time with people, even if it's just a lunch meeting. I could send them a confirmation text or email, or either I will call them and leave a voice message. So confirmation of the situation, because things change on their end as well as yours. During your ride-along, agency visit, interview, or whatever it is, pay close attention to what's going on. That goes without saying. Ask questions along the way. Of course, don't ask questions on a ride-along. In a situation when you know you shouldn't be asking questions, use this good old brain that I know you have and a good common sense, and listen and observe. Take notes as you go. It's important because you're not going to remember everything. Most of the time you can't record stuff because of issues that could end up in court. So, for example, if you're in a ride-along and a person, and actually if they put a person in the squad car, you're not going to be able to continue with that ride-along for reasons of security, but also if there's statements that are heard, you could end up called as a witness in a court, so you don't want to be in that situation. But you get my idea, my point. Remember, you're professional, okay? Don't wear jeans, flip-flops, shorts. Of course, if you're in Minnesota and in the next few months. I mean, today, man, it's 80-something degrees here in Chicago. We got some 80-degree temperatures coming up in a couple of days from now. You guys down in Florida, and you are accustomed to that kind of stuff. all the time. But if you're up north where we are, you know, if you're in Minnesota, Wisconsin, need I say North Dakota, those places, you're not going to be wearing flip-flops and stuff like that. Okay, so you're going to dress to impress. I was talking to one of my own kids who was going to a job interview. That's what you kind of like want to prepare yourself. But dear professor, this is not a job interview. Wrong approach. It is a form of job interview. One of the advantages of working in a situation like this, field work, is if you're not introduced to the agency before and you get to know them, your way that you come across, first impression, could be a problem for you if it's the wrong one. Let's say you find yourself working with someone in your course, in your field project, and then it comes to applying for the job, or either in the field, and it's close-knit, and you go in there and, you know, oh, God, I should have been more professional when I was doing my field work. Yes. Okay. So you get my point. You get my point. We put this all this kind of stuff in here because I have seen some stuff. Matter of fact, there is a module that you're actually going to prepare a video, or you find some links on the internet, a lot of them YouTubes, showing good and bad communication during interviews. And some of that stuff, it just, you know, it is just, it's hilarious. You crack up when you see it, but here's the point. There are people who really do this. They stage that stuff for you for those things, but there are people who really do it. I actually had a person who gave a resume, and the resume was they presented the resume, and it was folded up. And when the resume was folded up, they gave it to the person, and you can see the person when they got it, it's like, okay, this is a shopping list or what have you. I think, let's see, you need to, let me mute you. Okay, I just did. So anyway, the point of the matter is that you don't show up in a situation where you're going there and you actually so I don't know why. So you might need to mute yourself. I think that's Ashley that just joined us. Make sure you mute your mic, because anything that happens in there, I can hear it, and also so can everybody else that hears this. So anyway, the point of the matter is that go professional, and all right, put your best foot forward, which is what I tell you do in my classes. So the final step to the project is, notice what it says. Are you saying this right, Professor? Yeah. Let me show you something. I think it's due week. Is it week 9 or is it 10? It might be 11. Let me see. I'm just going to jump ahead and show you something. Okay. Let me go back. Now, this is week 11, so don't get too excited. I'm trying to show you this. It tells you, summarize your experience and describe the report and so forth and so on. This is the end. But if you go back and look at my rubric, let's see. Okay, it doesn't say that. Anyway, the bottom line is this. So go back to my initial statement. is that when you look at this assignment, it is an assignment that a lot of students, I'm sorry, I went to the wrong section. Go back here. I want to go to lessons. Yeah. When you get down this far to step 5, a 2 to 3 page report. Now, 2 to 3 pages does not include the cover sheet, describing what you observed. If you go longer, that's fine. You know, I've had a few students that go 5, 6 pages. Really good. As a conclusion to the report, 1 to 2 paragraphs describing how your education prepared you for the type of work that you observed. And then cover sheet and so forth. Your name, the agency you visited, the dates and times of your field work should be included in the paper, the name of the person you observed. Okay, remember I said, now if you observed yourself, just remember this. The work that you do, but you're also going to interact with some others. Usually it is a good thing if you work at an agency is to point out, you know, the assignments that are given to you by Lieutenant so-and-so or whomever. You get my drift on that point. The contact information for the agency and the person you observed. Now, you are strongly encouraged to schedule your field work as soon as possible, ASAP. And then I already told you about weeks 4 to 7, enough time to process the information. And then you will be presenting your first report and an update during Module 5. So don't wait till Module 4. You should get started right away. And your final report is due in Module 9. That's not true. Or did I miss something here? Something that we did tell them to fix. Let's see if I'm right. Okay, that's another written assignment. Now, anyway, I don't know why they said that in the final, but it doesn't matter. You can still get it ready as early as that. But week 11, and this is not to say to you, says, well, I still got more time after Module 9. Well, actually, to be honest with you, again, get yourself out of that mindset and get to the point consistently where you're proactive in terms of getting things done. And all of you in this class know where I'm coming from when it comes to that. And so that's it for the assignments for the week. Now, I am going to explain just quickly. It's 7:36, but I'm going to take about 10 minutes at the most to explain to you why I say my motto is adversity springboard to success. As many of you already know, that I had a violent death to occur in front of my face as a 7-year-old when my dad was killed, and that the man killed him did not go to jail, that he ended up on a technicality because my mom at that time said that my father was the aggressor, and so this guy actually never was prosecuted. They did what they call nolli prosecute, which means they did not prosecute the case. The prosecutor didn't have sufficient evidence that the only person who could probably tell them exactly what was going on was this 7-year-old kid named Richard Wright, but they didn't know that I had a photographic memory, and they weren't using that kind of stuff. They didn't want to subject a 7-year-old to testifying and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, the bottom line is that the guy walked. He ended up living in the house with us openly. He was already renting, and he then began to beat my mother profusely. For the next 5 years, I lived in a house of domestic violence. This is from 57 to 62. And so then she would go back and get him. If those of you who studied domestic violence, you know about the cycle of abuse and how all of that operates. By the way, this is October, which is National Domestic Violence Month. Domestic violence is something that I frown on very seriously. I'm very happy to see that the professional athletes are subjected to special um, um, treatment. Not that they're slapped on the wrist; they are suspended, and some of them even actually lose their jobs. But we have one that just recently here, a Chicago Cub player, who recently was suspended 40 games because of that. But anyway, the point of the matter is that in no situation should we have that. And then we're, of course, dealing with these hearings now concerning Judge Kavanaugh and the question of what happened with Dr. Ford and some other individuals, what happened with Cosby and Harvey Weinstein, and the list just goes on and on. Bill O'Reilly, I think Bill O'Reilly was one of them. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. The point of the matter is that there's either violence or mistreatment of females, which absolutely should not and will not take place, and I won't stand for it. I have 8 sisters. I have no brothers. I have 6 daughters and 2 sons, so you understand that deal. So anyway, back to the story here. This guy would beat my mother so bad, and she would keep going back to him. Finally, we moved from the area. It got really bad, gangs and so forth, and we moved to Gary, Indiana, where we lived about a few blocks away from this group of young kids that became famous, known as the Jacksons. So it was a nice area where we were living. And so my mom, this is in 62, we moved there. In 63, Memorial Day to be exact, my mother left us at home after celebrating that holiday to go to her restaurant. And the guy who had killed my dad and was her live-in boyfriend and the abuser went to take her and go to her barbecue place in downtown Gary. So, needless to say, the next day she hadn't come back home, and at some point during that day, the police showed up, and they announced to me, as the oldest, that my mom was killed, and I started yelling the guy's name. So I went through that period in my life, and so it was bad enough that he didn't go to jail for killing my dad. So then we moved back into an area with an aunt who didn't really want us, was trying to determine if they're going to split all 8 of us up. And so one of the toughest things in my life, the baby, was about a year old or so. Toughest job I had in 1994 was I had to eulogize her as a minister, and you guys know that I'm a pastor. That was a tough thing. So I went through all of this, that kind of stuff. So we ended up living with this aunt who didn't want us. Then another aunt came and took us, moved us into a house, and her husband and I didn't get along. And so this was in 64, and I found out that the guy pled guilty to killing my mother, and that they sentenced him to 10 years, and that 10 years quickly came to be brought to my attention as meaning 5, and that for good behavior he would serve 3.5 years. Troubled me to no end. Bad enough that my dad we didn't get anything for him killing my dad, that we then have to deal with this situation now where this man was only going to serve 3.5 years for taking the life of the mother of 8. And so he ended up pleading guilty, and it troubled me. So when I get troubled, I started to ask questions, and I asked a lot of questions, and finally someone told me that this person, these people called lawyers, deal with that. So I went to the library at my school as a 14-year-old and asked for a book on attorneys or lawyers, and they had one little book. Took that book out, read it cover to cover overnight. The next day, anybody I met, I introduced myself as Richard Wright, and I'm going to become a lawyer. And so people told me I was aiming too high, but I want you to understand that I don't let things stop me when I'm going for something, particularly if it's something of a positive nature such as that. So I found myself in a situation where I was still being challenged again. My family didn't really support me in terms of that. So I heard this lady on, and by the way, the uncle that I was living with at that time, we didn't get along because he wanted me to take his last name, which I didn't want to take because I wanted to carry my dad's name on. But at any rate, there were some things that happened that I would find out years and years later that I was illegally adopted, even though never used the name. I stayed with Richard Wright, which was the name I was born with. Actually, it was Richard Howard Wright, and stayed with that through all of my high school, college, and got even married under that name. So anyway, the bottom line was there were major problems that I faced. I would then find out some years later that the man who wanted me to take his name was actually assaulting my sisters, and it just was typical of the kind of bad situations that I had to face on my way to where I am now. So anyway, I ended up meeting this lady that I heard on the radio, and I asked her to be my mother, and we became friends. And then, of course, years and years later, in '84, and I'm jumping around, that I would find out when I went to get a birth certificate that my name had been illegally changed when I was 14. And this lady and I talked. I was a practicing lawyer at that time, and she decided, and I decided, that she would adopt me as an adult. I had lived with her off and on, so I qualified under the law. And we got my name changed and added her name, so I became Richard Howard D, D-E-E. Her name was Mary D. She was a TV personality in Chicago on WGN TV. But anyway, she became legally my mother as she is now. So anyway, I'm saying all this to say these are all some pretty tough things I went through and challenges. So I went through high school, living with my aunt, and then as soon as I graduated from high school, I told her I was leaving. I was 19. I moved in with some friends. Their mom let me come and stay with them. I took a job that my friend's mother's friend, her friend, worked in a law firm, got me a job in a mailroom at a big law firm. In the meantime, I registered for night classes because my aunt and uncle that I was living with, who had the ability to sign for me to get a 4-year scholarship, my uncle was the one in control of that and said, no, we're not signing anything. And so I went ahead and did junior college. And so I got my job, started in the mailroom in the law firm. When I got in that place, I started introducing myself to all the lawyers and telling them what my goal was to become a lawyer. And they paid attention to me. I got married right away after that, which was not advised, but I got married in 1970. And then 71 and 72, here comes these two kids. So I had to go to school. By the way, I had no car. I was on public transportation. I had to be at work at 8:30 in the morning. I had a 2-hour bus and train ride. And so I studied on the train and on the buses. And so anyway, I would have to be at work at 8:30 and get off at 4. I had to be in class at 4:30. I did that. And at this junior college, I began to get on the dean's list, studying hard. At the same time, I found myself in a situation where the law firm began to recognize that I meant what I said, and they promoted me to a file clerk. And then I was in the file clerk job for maybe about 6 months, almost a year, and something happened to the law librarian, and they said, I think you can do this job. And I, of course, said yes. and I took the job on as law librarian in the law firm. Well, the job as law librarian was to be custodian of the books. I used to go to the courthouse library. I met other people in the area as in the field that were doing it, and so I became very not content with putting the books away or being a custodian. I wanted to learn what was in those books, so I started reading them. I started listening to the lawyers in the library discuss their cases. Well, one occasion, the lawyers all were discussing a case or issue of law, and I sat there and listened. I didn't say anything, and I waited for them to leave, and I went and I pulled 10 cases, 10 books, put them on the table, put a legal pad on, and said, "Do not disturb." The lawyers came back from lunch, and they said to me, "Richard, do you have any idea where these cases are? We need these. These are on-point cases, and all of them are missing." So I point them to the shelf, to the table where I had pulled those books. And they said, "Who did that?" And I said, "I did." So they said, "Well, you know what? I'm taking you to the boss." And the boss, and it's good sometimes to go to the boss, but this was a good time to go to the boss, where the boss was told that they were wasting their money on me, that I knew how to research, and I told them I also knew how to write memos and briefs. So they hired someone to do my job and turned me into what was called a law clerk, which is today known as a paralegal. And I did that. In the meantime, I made my way through from a junior college to a four-year institution, Roosevelt University, studying political science at night and Saturdays. And so the bottom line is that I continued to do well. Honor roll, dean's list every semester. So came time for me to go to law school. I already had decided what law school I wanted to go to in Northwestern University. I was told that it's not a good idea to pick one university because of the fact that one university is hard. You should pick at least three so you can have a plan B and C. I said, "I'm not having a plan B and C. I'm going to Northwestern." I wasn't cocky. I wasn't arrogant. I was just confident. And so as it was, I took the LSAT, which I didn't do as well, but my GPA and everything was good. And I got letters of reference. So I sent the package over to the Northwest University. It was about a 6-page application, but when I finished with all the additions I had to it, exhibits, it fit into a box that was real thick, and it was delivered to the admissions office. Well, at that time, Northwestern, I would find out, had thousands of students vying for 100 or 250 seats that they were offering for the class of 78, which started in 75. So anyway, I would get a call from someone inviting me to come, saying this is something they don't do, but they just wanted to know who this person was that was behind this information. So I sat in a room at the law school and sat across the table from 3 or 4 individuals who I fired questions, not grilling, but questions, listening to my answers and the explanations and so forth. Following that, they said we need to deliberate, and they deliberated about, maybe it seemed like an eternity. It was probably like about a half an hour at the most. And came back and they said, well, we don't make offers in this situation like this. What we do is we send out letters. And so they said to me these words. He says, we can't say that verbally that you will be part of the class of 78, which starts in 75, which was a few months. That was like probably around about June or May, probably May. And the class starts in late August or September of 75. So they said to me, but you will get some correspondence from us that I think that you'll really like. So they were just basically telling me. So I got accepted into the law school class, continued studying with these little kids. So I had to leave my job because I was working part-time at the law firm, because the law school first year is like 2 years of college, intense. And the Northwestern had a rule that you could not work. So my wife at that time was a teacher, and so she carried the load. However, this was the first time in the history of Chicago that they had a teacher strike, and they went on strike, and we lost all income. So here I am trying to focus on this tough curriculum, and it just got to me. And I went and told one of my professors, Dr. Joyce Hughes, I said, I think I'm going to have to take a leave or leave school for a while and go to work. She said, before you leave, come talk to me in my office, which I did. She took me in her office, stood in front of the door, and said, have a seat. And she said, this is not negotiable. You will not leave this room until you decide you're going to stay and stick it out. So we agreed, kind of under duress, but best duress that ever happened to me. I made it through. It was tough. Let me tell you how bad it was. We ran out of money. The electricity went off. So guess what? I studied by candlelight. Said if Abraham Lincoln could do it, so could I. And I did. So I succeeded in making it through. And I graduated in the class of 78 with my law degree. Now, while I was in law school, one of my classmates' father was a distinguished criminal defense lawyer, and I was introduced to him, and he became one of the lecturers at the college, at the law school, and I had him for trial advocacy, and then he ultimately was our commencement speaker. His name was R. Eugene Pincham. He became a judge later. But Judge Pincham took me aside after me spending some time at his house, talking to myself and 3 or 4 other young law students about how to operate as lawyers. And he ended up giving me some advice that sounded pretty crazy, but I was always an open-minded person. He said, if you, based on what you went through, because he learned what I went through, he says, you need to be able to get to the bottom of this. The best way for you to do it is not be a prosecutor, but to be a defense lawyer, representing and defending people who are murderers, bad people. I didn't hesitate. I respected him, and I did. Best decision I ever made. And then he suggested, after I graduated from law school, that I go to California for a seminar in University of San Diego with other defense attorneys. And when I got there, they put me in a section, and the guy who was over my section was the guy at that time who called himself John Cochran, later on to become OJ's lawyer, Johnny Cochran. So I had some pretty good training. So I began doing well, doing real well with the juries. And then also I started doing radio, a law program, Know Your Rights, which was spelled W-R-I-G-H-T-S, play on my name. And then I also had a phone number, 974-4487, which was spelled W-R-I-G-H-T-S. So I was moving pretty well. My law practice took off. I got into ministry, 91 to 93, going back a little bit from that point. I went to seminary for Master of Arts in Religion. So anyway, the point of the matter is that I continued moving forward. I stepped out of the big law firm in 1980 to get out there and begin to do what I wanted to do. Started out with some guys. I didn't like their ethics, so I went and started my own and hired people, and it took off. Well, in the meantime, my first wife and I, we separated, went different directions because of some reasons, things that were going on, and we went amicably, got divorced, and by this time we had 3 kids. The last one was born right after I graduated from law school in 78, October. I graduated in June 17th of 78. So anyway, I ended up meeting this other young lady, and then we dated and we got married. And it was a bittersweet situation. Found out that her mother was going to become the village president or mayor of a tough town in the south suburbs called Ford Heights. And so she needed a village attorney, so I took her took that job along with keeping my private practice. And then I said, I'm not keeping this job unless I can carry a gun. He said, you have to be a police officer to carry a gun. So I said, point me to the place where I need to do that. And I did. I went to the academy and became a part-time police officer. And then I became an investigator after it became clear that there was some corrupt police stuff happening, so I was in internal affairs. And then I would do the village prosecution for the town. So I had wore all these different hats. So then I ended up finding out that the woman I was married to at that time was doing some things not so good with the pastor, and so we split up. And I went on about my life. She and I had a daughter, so my fourth daughter, who's now 28. I went on with my life and met the young lady that I'm married to now, going on 25 years. And she and I pastor a church together as well. But here's what happened. I found myself with all these bad things happening. I retired from being a lawyer in 2000, a little bit about 5 years after I married my current wife. And I ran some businesses that turned out okay. I taught special education, dealing with behavioral disorder kids. And a number of things happened. More kids start coming along. So anyway, the bottom line is this. In 2011, someone brought to my attention that there was this school that was looking for an adjunct professor to teach business law. The name of that school was Rasmussen College. I took the job, got the job, teaching residentially. Knew nothing about what we're doing now, online or any of that. In fact, I said, oh, wow, I don't know if I can do that. But that was just a thought. That wasn't me, as of course you know. So I ended up taking the job, and then I told them right away that I'm a criminal justice guy. They moved me into criminal justice, and I began teaching criminal justice. 2014, a full-time position opened up as state program coordinator, giving me responsibility over the criminal justice program, and I ended up taking that job, getting that job, and had responsibility of all 4 campuses in Illinois: the Romeoville campus, the Rockford campus, the Mokina-Tinley Park campus, and the Aurora campus. So I was doing that and starting to teach 3 classes. Well, then they changed the roles, did away with the state program coordinators, and so I was added 2 more classes, and since that time, teaching full-time. By the way, they came to me right after I got the full-time position in 2014 and says, our program's going online entirely. I said, yuck, oh, man. But guess what? I don't run away from a challenge. And so I went through the training, learning stuff that was really like for me I'm 68 years old, something that that's why I tell you guys, I says, I know how this stuff works because I was committed, not just to keep a job, but I like learning. And so I ended up, of course, teaching as I do now, criminal justice, and many of you have met me years ago through other classes. And so I continue to this day to impart to my students empathy based on the situation I went through, also excellence. And I always say this, that I'm going to prepare, my goal is to prepare educational, professional, and ethical criminal justice individuals. And that's what my goal is. And that's why I am the way I am today, and that's why I won't lower my expectations for you, because it's doing you a disservice. And so that's the story. I said I was going to go a little shorter, but it went a little longer. But at any rate, that is why adversity is the springboard to success. It is my motto, it's my life, and I share it with all of my students because I want you to know that I know that just as I could do it, so could you. And as a person who has gone through challenges, I can help you through your challenges to cross the finish line, not crawling, but to go across the finish line. The finish line for me is when I see that you guys have graduated. When I see you with those gold cords, I know that is something extra special. When I see you with those red, white, and blue cords, which represents people who served in the military, I know there's something very special. When I see you at the academic awards programs where you receive Dean's List and Honor Roll, those are the people who I'm really, really, really close to. And I encourage students to keep up with me even after you graduate. I have students who are my friends on Facebook, which, by the way, if you're not, some of you are my friends on Facebook. I'm under Richard Wright, JD, and I accept friend requests from students. And then you learn a lot even more about me in that situation. So the point of the matter is guys, for the next 11 weeks, we will be working together as a team. As you will exit this area of your education, hopefully moving on to the bachelor's and then beyond that. I've had a few of you guys who have taken me on and want to continue with being a lawyer. I've helped several students to reach that point. I'm not a quitter, as you can tell, and I don't allow my students to do that. So with that, I'm going to say good night to you, but I'm going to give you my keyword. My keyword for tonight: adversity. That's it. Okay? So I will see you guys on the 17th. Thank you. And hope that, I know you've heard this before, but, here's the deal. I still remind students that's heard it before. I says, let me tell you something. When something becomes a part of you, you can tell it over and over and over. But my goal is not to bore, but to encourage, so that when students graduate, they will always remember Professor Wright, Richard Wright, Dr. Wright, whatever you want to call me, Richard. The point of the matter is someone who is in your corner and will not let you quit. I can't stop you from quitting, but I will do everything possible short of putting you in handcuffs and those kind of things. Student success, that's what we want, and that's our mantra here. So good night, and again, thank you for being so patient and hanging out with me. Okay, get those assignments done, and see you on the 17th. Good night.